They tied our hands behind our backs with coarse rope, the kind that digs deep into the skin until every movement burns. They dragged us barefoot through the dirt toward the center of the square. The air was heavy with dust and dread, and I could hear the murmurs of the crowd gathering. They had come to witness our death. I stumbled as the guards pushed me forward, but my brother bound beside me whispered with trembling lips, "Stay strong, don't deny him." His words pierced my heart like a blade, for I knew they were his last. In that moment I realized there was no escape. The Sharia court had passed its verdict, guilty of apostasy. In their eyes, leaving Islam for Christ was the ultimate crime, deserving only death. We were condemned to die that morning. And yet, if you stay with me until the end, you'll see how Jesus himself stepped into that execution ground, silenced the hands of my executioners, and wrote a story no human hand could have scripted. This may be the most dangerous testimony I ever share, because it reveals not just my story, but the reality of countless others living under the weight of Sharia law. Before I begin, I want to ask you for something simple but powerful. Comment below where you're watching from, so that when others read your words, they will know they are not alone. Together, we are building a wall of prayer across nations. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Yusuf Khalid. Where I was born is not as significant as what I learned growing up, that religion was law and the law was unbreakable. I came into the world in a dusty village where the call to prayer marked the rhythm of life, where every child was taught from the cradle that Islam was not just a faith. It was the air we breathed, the water we drank, and the blood that ran through our veins. From the time I could walk, I was surrounded by rules. How to speak, how to dress, how to bow, how to pray. In school, the Quran was not just a subject, it was the lens through which we were taught to view everything. Our teachers warned us that to question, even silently, was to court damnation, both in this life and the next. My father was a devout man, respected in our community. He had callous hands from years of work and a voice that carried authority. My mother, quiet and gentle, bore the weight of her silence with grace. Both believed that raising us in strict adherence to Sharia was the only way to secure honor for our family. I was the second of 3 children. My older brother, strong and protective, often reminded me that our lives were not our own. We belong to the Ummah, he would say. We exist to uphold the law. At the time, I believed him. We all did. But deep inside, questions stirred, questions I dared not speak aloud. Even as a child, I wondered, if God is merciful, why do his followers live in such fear? Why does every prayer feel more like obligation than love? Why is joy absent from our rituals? Those questions simmered quietly, buried beneath layers of duty and tradition. I carried them silently until one night, when my grandmother called me to her side. She was frail, her skin like parchment, her breath shallow. Death hovered close, and with it came a boldness I had never seen in her eyes. She beckoned me to lean closer, so close that I could feel her trembling breath against my ear. "There is a truth," she whispered, "that you must know before I leave this world." I frowned, confused. "What truth, grandmother?" She paused, glancing toward the door, to be sure no one was listening. Then, with a strength that seemed to come from beyond herself, she said the unthinkable. "There is one God, and his name is Jesus." My blood turned cold. The very mention of that name was forbidden in our household. It was a name spoken only with contempt, a name used to curse. Yet here was my grandmother, frail and dying, speaking it with reverence, as though it was the sweetest word her lips had ever formed. She went on, her voice breaking, "Your grandfather died for believing in him. They told you it was illness that took him, but no, it was Sharia. He refused to deny Christ, and for that they silenced him. I have carried this secret in my heart for decades. I could not speak it, not even to your father, but I cannot leave this world without telling you. Remember this: Jesus is the truth. Tears filled her eyes. She pressed my hand with surprising strength. Promise me you will never forget. 3 days later, she was gone. Her words haunted me. In our world, such a confession was not just dangerous, it was deadly. Apostasy was punishable by execution. Even the suspicion of sympathy for Christianity could mark a family for ruin. And yet, I could not erase her voice from my mind. I replayed it endlessly. There is one God, and his name is Jesus. How could this be true? Had she lost her mind in her final days, or had she seen something no one else dared to see? I remembered my grandfather, whose death I had always been told was caused by illness. Suddenly the pieces no longer fit. Could it be that he too had chosen Jesus and paid with his life? The questions grew louder each day. I began to notice small things I had overlooked. The hollowness in our rituals, the fear in the eyes of those around me, the weight of a religion that promised peace yet delivered only control. It was during this time of inner turmoil that I encountered something extraordinary. One evening, walking home from the madrasa, I saw a group of boys teasing an older man. He was a stranger, dressed plainly with a quiet dignity. The boys mocked him, calling him names I did not understand. I stopped watching, and in that moment, he lifted his head and looked at me. In his eyes, I saw something I had never seen before: peace. Not the false peace of forced obedience, but a deep, unshakable calm that seemed untouched by the cruelty around him. Later, I learned whispers about him, that he belonged to a secret group, that he prayed differently, that he spoke of forgiveness in a world built on vengeance. I dared not approach him, but the image of his eyes lingered. It was as if, for the first time, I glimpsed light in a world of shadows. At home, life continued under the watchful gaze of Sharia. My father's pride in our religious devotion only deepened. My brother memorized verses of the Quran with zeal, his voice rising proudly in prayer. And I, trapped between fear and curiosity, felt my heart split in two. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to know more about this Jesus my grandmother had whispered of, this truth that seemed to flicker faintly in the darkness. But I knew the cost. Already, my grandmother's words had placed a burden on me. If I spoke them aloud, I could condemn my entire family. If I pursued this hidden truth, I might lose everything. So I buried the questions. I hid the longing. I told myself to forget. But seeds planted in the dark have a way of growing. And soon that seed would break through the soil of fear, changing everything. If this story is already stirring something in your heart, I ask you to pause and share this video right now. You may not realize it, but your simple act could place this testimony in front of someone who is secretly crying out for hope, just as I once was. Don't underestimate the power of your share. The questions my grandmother planted refused to die. I tried to drown them in daily prayers, recitations, and obligations. I tried to silence them with the routines of school and the expectations of my family. But at night, when the village grew quiet and the muezzin's call no longer echoed in the air, the questions returned louder, sharper, hungrier. Who was Jesus really? Why would my grandmother risk everything to whisper his name? Why would my grandfather choose death instead of denial? These thoughts became my constant shadow. At the madrasa, I became bolder in subtle ways. During lessons, when my teacher quoted the Quran about Christians being misguided, I found myself silently asking, but what if they are not? When we memorized the hadith condemning apostates, My heart pounded, for I already carried in me the secret of one who had dared to believe differently. I began to test the boundaries of conversation, quietly, casually, asking questions that seemed harmless on the surface. What do Christians believe about God? Or why does the Quran mention Isa so often? Most people dismissed me with suspicion. Some grew angry. Once, a boy shouted, "Be careful with your words. Do you want trouble?" I laughed it off, pretending curiosity, but inside I trembled. Then, one day something happened that changed everything. It was in the dusty lanes of our village market. I was bargaining for bread when I overheard two men whispering near a stall. Their voices were low, urgent, careful. I caught fragments. "Meeting tonight, be careful, pray in secret." I froze. I had heard words like this only once before from my grandmother's lips. I lingered near them, pretending to examine goods. One of the men noticed me and stiffened. His eyes darted nervously. "Go," he muttered to the other, and they hurried away. But something in me had been awakened. For days, I watched the man who had spoken. He was not from our village, but traveled often through it. His face was ordinary, but his manner, the way he treated people with quiet respect, the way he helped a beggar without being seen, struck me. Finally, one evening, I dared to follow him. He slipped through side streets, past alleys, until he reached an abandoned building at the edge of the village. He glanced around, then disappeared inside. My heart thundered. Everything in me screamed, "This is dangerous. If you are caught, you will not return home." Yet another voice whispered, "Go, this is the moment." I waited, then crept to the building. From inside came faint sounds, not chants, not Quran recitation, but something softer, a melody, words carried by trembling voices. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." I knew those words were not ours. They carried a weight, a tenderness that pierced me. I pressed closer, peering through a crack in the wall. Inside, about 10 people sat on the floor in a circle. The man I had followed was among them. At the center sat an older woman, her hair streaked with gray, her hands folded. She spoke in whispers, yet her words carried power. She quoted passages from memory. She spoke of Jesus as Savior, Redeemer, friend. Her voice trembled with emotion as she recited, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son." I had never heard words like these spoken with such intimacy. One by one, the people prayed quietly, tears streaming down their faces. Their prayers were not mechanical recitation, but conversation. They spoke as though God was listening, as though He was near. I wanted to rush in, to join them, but fear gripped me. If I entered and they rejected me as a spy, it could doom us all. If I was followed here, every one of them would suffer. So I remained outside, trembling in the shadows, my heart pounding in rhythm with their whispered prayers. That night, I returned home with a fire burning in my chest. Days passed and I could not think of anything else. I had seen with my own eyes what my grandmother had hinted at, a hidden faith, alive beneath the suffocating weight of Sharia law. But how could I approach them? Finally, one evening, courage overcame fear. I found the man again in the market. My hands trembled as I slipped closer. "Sir," I whispered, I saw you that night." He stiffened. His eyes grew hard. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me into a narrow alley. His grip was strong. His face stern. "What do you mean?" he demanded. I heard the words. I stammered, I know about Jesus." For a long moment he studied me. I thought he might strike me, or worse, report me. Then his expression softened just slightly. Do you know the risk of what you are saying? Yes, I whispered, but I cannot forget it. He released my wrists. His voice dropped. If you are lying, we all die. If you are true, meet me tomorrow night by the well at the edge of the village, alone. If you tell anyone, your blood will be on your own head. The next evening, under the cover of darkness, I crept to the well. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would betray me. He was there, waiting. We walked in silence until we reached the same abandoned building. He led me inside, where the small group had gathered again. The older woman looked at me with eyes full of both suspicion and compassion. "Why have you come?" she asked. I swallowed hard, because my grandmother told me the truth before she died. She said, "Jesus is Lord." The room grew silent. Some exchanged worried glances. The woman's eyes softened. "Then you have come home," she whispered. That night, for the first time, I held a scrap of paper in my hands. It was small, torn, barely legible, but on it were words that would change me forever. It was from the Gospel of Matthew. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Tears blurred my vision. Never had words spoken so directly to the weight I carried. I read them again and again, clutching the paper as though it was life itself. The older woman warned me, "We have little. Most of our Bible is in our memory, but what you hold is more valuable than gold. Guard it with your life." I nodded, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. From then on, my life split in two. By day, I was the obedient son, the dutiful student, the faithful participant in prayers and rituals. By night, I was a trembling new believer, memorizing scraps of scripture, whispering prayers to the Savior I barely understood. Every meeting was a risk. We never gathered in the same place twice. We never used the same signal. Sometimes it was a cough, sometimes a phrase slipped into casual speech. But the danger only deepened the bond between us. Each face in that circle became family. I began to notice changes in myself. My prayers at the mosque felt hollow, but when I whispered to Jesus in secret, I felt peace. My anger softened. My heart, once restless, began to steady. But with peace came fear, for I knew if I was discovered, it would not just be me. My family would suffer. My brother, my parents, their lives would be branded by my choice. One night, I confessed this fear to the older woman. She looked at me with steady eyes. "Following Jesus always costs something," she said. "For some, it costs friends. For others, it costs freedom. For some, it costs their very life. But what we gain in Him is greater than anything we lose." Her words echoed in my soul. I knew the road ahead would not be easy, but I also knew there was no turning back. It was not long before whispers began. Neighbors asked why I seemed distant. My brother questioned why I was distracted during prayers. My father scolded me for neglecting my studies. The cracks in my facade were beginning to show. And though I did not know it yet, the eyes of the authorities were already turning toward me. If you are still watching, I want to ask you something personal. Would your faith stand if every prayer, every whisper could cost you your life? If yes, write in the comments, "Jesus saves." Those two words are not just text, they are a declaration, a stand, a witness that you are unashamed. The night of my arrest was ordinary at first. Ordinary enough that I almost believed the danger had passed. I had attended a small gathering the evening before, just three of us huddled in a dark storeroom, whispering passages of scripture we had memorized. We prayed quietly, our breaths visible in the cold air. There was no Bible in sight, only the word etched into trembling hearts. When I returned home, my father greeted me with suspicion. "You're late again," he said, his voice sharp. I mumbled something about studying with friends. He stared at me long and hard, as though searching for cracks in the wall of excuses I had built. That night, I lay awake on my mat, the weight of fear pressing down on me. I knew the risks. I knew every step I took could be my last as a free man, but I also knew I could not turn back. It was just after dawn when the pounding came. Fists hammered against our wooden door with such force that the hinges rattled. My mother gasped, clutching her scarf tighter around her face. My father froze, his expression pale. Everyone in the village knew what such pounding meant. The Sharia police. My father opened the door with trembling hands. Outside stood 3 men, stern-faced, robed in authority, their eyes cold. Behind them, a small crowd gathered, drawn by curiosity and fear. "Where is he?" one of the men barked. My father's voice quivered. "Who?" "Your son." Before I could move, they pushed past him, storming into the house. Their eyes scanned every corner until they landed on me. "You," one hissed, jabbing a finger toward me. "Come with us." They seized me by the arms, binding my wrists tightly with rough rope. My mother cried out, falling to her knees, begging them to stop. My father stood silent, shame etched on his face. I was dragged through the streets, barefoot, stumbling as the crowd followed. Some whispered, some jeered, some turned away in silence. In the center of the square, they shoved me into the back of a truck. The door slammed shut, sealing me in darkness. I whispered under my breath, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The words steadied me, though fear roared like thunder in my chest. The truck jolted to a stop. I was hauled out and marched into a low concrete building. Inside, the air was stale, the walls bare. A single chair sat in the middle of the room, beneath a flickering light bulb. They forced me down onto the chair, binding my ankles. Across from me sat a man in a black robe, his eyes sharp as daggers. He was the interrogator. On the table before him lay a folder thin, but thick enough to contain my death. "Do you know why you are here?" he asked coldly. I swallowed hard. "No, sir." His hand slammed down on the folder. "Do not lie. We know what you are. Apostate, blasphemer, traitor to your people." I stared at the floor, silent. He leaned forward. "Do you deny it?" My lips trembled. The words caught in my throat. To deny would be a lie. To confess would be a death sentence. Finally, I whispered, "I cannot deny Jesus." The man's eyes flashed with fury. His hand struck across my face, the blow ringing in my ears. "Fool," he spat, "do you not know the punishment? Under Sharia, there is only one fate for apostates." He leaned closer, his breath hot, death. They began with fists. One guard struck me in the stomach, another across the jaw. I doubled over, gasping for breath, but they hauled me upright again. "Who else?" the interrogator demanded. "Who gathers with you? Give us their names." I shook my head. "Names!" he roared. Another blow. My vision blurred. I remembered the older woman's words. "If they discover you, protect the others, do not speak." Through cracked lips I whispered, "I have no names to give." The blows intensified. My ribs ached, blood filled my mouth, but I clung to silence. For 3 days, the pattern repeated. Day after day, I was dragged into the interrogation room. They deprived me of food, allowed only sips of water. They kept me awake with bright lights and shouted accusations. They tried different tactics. One guard played the role of friend, whispering, "If you just renounce Jesus, this will all end. We'll let you go." Another threatened, "We will bring your family here. Your father will pay for your crimes." Each word sliced at my heart, but I held firm. Lord, I prayed silently. Give me strength to endure, not for myself, but for those who will suffer if I betray them. On the fourth day, I was dragged into a larger room. At the front sat the Qadi, the judge of Sharia law. His beard was long, his eyes cold. Beside him stood two clerics reciting verses of the Quran, condemning apostates. The room was filled with officials, guards, and few onlookers. The judge's voice boomed. You have been accused of apostasy, leaving Islam and following the false prophet Isa al-Masih. Do you deny this charge? I stood trembling, rope cutting into my wrists. My lips parted and the words came out stronger than I expected. I cannot deny him. Jesus is Lord. A ripple of shock spread through the room. The judge's face hardened. Then there is no need for further discussion. By the authority of Sharia, the sentence is death. You will be executed publicly alongside your brother at dawn. My knees buckled. My brother? What had they done? I had not seen him since the morning of my arrest. Had they taken him too? That evening, they dragged me into a cell. Inside, chained to the wall, was my brother. His face was bruised, his eyes red. He looked at me with a mixture of fury and despair. This is your fault, he hissed. Your secret meetings, your whispers. You have brought shame on us all. Tears stung my eyes. I never meant. Silence, he snapped. Do you know what they will do to us? They will kill us both, and it is because of you. I wanted to tell him everything about grandmother, about the peace I had found in Jesus, but his anger was too raw. He would not listen. So I sat in silence, the weight of guilt crushing me. That night, as we lay in the cold cell, I prayed silently. My brother muttered curses under his breath, but eventually sleep claimed him. I whispered, Lord, if tomorrow is my end, give me courage. Let me not fail you. And if it is your will, let my brother see your power before the end. As I prayed, a strange peace washed over me. It was not the peace of safety, but the peace of surrender. I knew I could not save myself, but perhaps God would use even my death as testimony. At dawn, the guards entered. They untied my brother, then me. Rope bound our hands tightly. They shoved us into the harsh morning light. The square was already crowded. Men, women, children all gathered to witness what they believed was justice. We were dragged forward, step by step, toward the place of execution. My brother walked beside me, his lips trembling. He whispered one final time, "Stay strong, don't deny him." Tears filled my eyes. I knew those were his last words, for they would kill him first. And then it would be my turn. Friend, as you hear this part of my story, I want to ask you something. Would you have stood firm in that moment, knowing death awaited? If you believe Jesus gives strength even in the valley of death, subscribe now. Let this channel be the place where your faith is reminded and renewed each week. Don't walk alone. The sky was still dark when they dragged us into the courtyard. The air carried the chill of dawn, sharp against my skin. My wrists were bound so tightly that my hands had turned numb. My brother stumbled beside me, his lips pressed tight, his body trembling. The guards marched us toward the center of the square. Word had spread quickly, the whole village seemed to have gathered. Men stood shoulder to shoulder. Women clutched their children close, forcing them to watch. Some faces carried pity, others disgust, still others curiosity. The ground was uneven beneath my bare feet. Dust clung to the sweat on my skin. I lifted my eyes to the horizon where the first faint glow of sunrise painted the sky. How strange, I thought, that the world should look so beautiful on the day I was to die. We were shoved against a wall, our bodies pressed close together. A man in black robes stepped forward, holding a scroll. His voice rang out, cold and sharp. By the authority of Sharia law, These men stand guilty of apostasy, abandoning Islam and following the false prophet Isa al-Masih. Their betrayal of faith is betrayal of the community. Therefore, by the will of Allah and the decree of the court, their punishment is death. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, others looked away. The judge's voice grew louder. The sentence will be carried out immediately. The guard seized my brother first. His eyes locked on mine, wide with terror. His lips trembled as though he wanted to say something, but no words came. They forced him to his knees in the dirt. A guard raised his weapon, a rifle gleaming in the rising sunday. I cried out, straining against the ropes. "No, please!" My voice broke, but no one moved to stop it. The command rang out, "Fire!" A single shot split the morning silence. My brother's body crumbled, lifeless, to the ground. I froze. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. My breath caught in my throat. My body shook violently. He was gone. My brother, my companion, my blood taken before my eyes. Grief clawed at me, but stronger still was a strange, fierce determination. I whispered under my breath, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." The guards turned toward me. Rough hands seized my shoulders, shoving me to my knees beside my brother's body. The dust rose around us, clinging to my tears. A commander barked, "Prepare!" 6 soldiers stepped forward, rifles raised. They formed a line just a few paces away, their faces taut with focus. Their fingers hovered over the triggers. The crowd fell into hushed silence. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. I closed my eyes. My lips moved in prayer. "Lord, into your hands I commit my spirit. If this is the end, let me be faithful. Let them see not me, but you." Fire! I braced for impact. I expected searing pain, the force of bullets tearing through my flesh, darkness swallowing me. But nothing came. Silence. I opened my eyes slowly. The soldiers stood frozen, rifles aimed directly at my chest. Their fingers had squeezed the triggers, yet no shots rang out. Confusion spread across their faces. One soldier shook his rifle, another checked his chamber. The commander's face turned red with fury. "Again!" he shouted. They adjusted, reloaded, aimed. Once more. Fire. Again, silence. Not a single weapon discharged. Not one bullet left its chamber. The crowd stirred uneasily. Whispers rose. Faces filled with confusion and fear. The commander stormed forward, snatching a rifle from one of the men. He aimed directly at me, his face twisted with rage, and pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. His eyes widened, his hands shook. He tried again. Still nothing. The impossible repeated itself. Every rifle, every shot refused to fire. A murmur of fear spread through the crowd. Some whispered that it was a curse, others that it was a sign. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances, their bodies trembling. In a culture where the spiritual and physical intertwined, they could not dismiss what was happening. For a moment, the square was utterly still. The soldiers, the crowd, the guards, all frozen, eyes wide. And in that silence, I felt it. A presence. A peace so overwhelming, it was as if heaven itself had bent low to shield me. Tears streamed down my face. My lips formed the words, soft but steady. "Jesus, you are here." The commander cursed under his breath. His fury faltered into fear. He turned to the judge, his voice low but desperate. "The rifles, they will not fire. None of them. I have never seen such a thing." The judge's face paled. He glanced around nervously, aware of the murmurs spreading through the crowd. He hissed back, then used the sword, and this quickly. A guard stepped forward, sword drawn, its blade catching the morning light. He lifted it high above his head, ready to strike. I closed my eyes once more. Into your hands. The blade swung down and snapped. The metal shattered in two pieces, clattering to the ground. Gasps filled the square. Women covered their mouths. Men stepped back in fear. Even the children, too young to understand, clutched their mothers tightly. The guard dropped what remained of the sword, his face pale as death. He stumbled backward, trembling. From somewhere in the crowd, a voice broke the silence. This is a sign. Another voice followed. God is protecting him. The whispers multiplied, rippling like waves. Fear gripped the authorities, but awe swept through the people. The judge rose to his feet, his voice unsteady but firm. Enough! Take him away! The guards, hesitant and trembling, obeyed. They pulled me to my feet, untying the ropes with shaking hands. No one dared look me in the eye. The judge declared, his execution is postponed. He will be sent to prison for re-education. Perhaps there he will learn. But I knew the truth. It was not postponed. It was prevented. The God of heaven had intervened. As they dragged me away, I turned my head to where my brother's body still lay in the dirt. Grief stabbed through me, hot and sharp. Tears blurred my vision. Lord, I whispered, why him and not me? Why save me and not my brother? No answer came, only the quiet assurance that God's hand had moved and his purposes stretched beyond what I could see. That night, in my cell, I overheard two guards speaking outside. It's bad luck, one muttered. 12 rifles all failing at once? Impossible. The other replied in a hushed tone, my grandmother told me of such things. When heaven protects someone, you cannot touch them. Maybe this man is under such protection. Their words sent shivers down my spine. Even they could not deny what had happened. I fell to my knees in the darkness of my cell. My body still ached from the beatings. My heart still bled for my brother, but my spirit soared. Lord, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. You silenced their rifles. You shattered their sword. You showed your power in front of them all. I vow, as long as I have breath, I will tell the world what you have done. The walls of the cell seemed to glow with his presence. For the first time since my arrest, I felt no fear. The next morning, the guards returned. They chained my hands once more. You are being transferred, one grunted. Where? I asked. Prison. The word fell like a stone. I did not yet know the suffering that awaited me there. But I knew this. If God could silence bullets and shatter swords, He could keep me alive even in the deepest pit. If this miracle speaks to your heart, I want you to do something simple but powerful. Share this testimony right now. You may think it's a small action, but it could be the spark that keeps someone else's faith alive when they're facing their own firing squad. Let your share be an act of faith. The morning after the execution ground, the guards returned to my cell. Their faces were pale, their voices tight. They avoided my eyes as they shackled my wrists and ankles. You're being transferred, one muttered. To where? I asked. Prison. The word carried a weight I could not fully comprehend. Execution had been swift, final. Prison promised something slower, more drawn out, a death of another kind. They loaded me into the back of a truck with metal bars welded across the windows. The engine roared and the village faded from sight. Through the slits I glimpsed the wide expanse of land, barren fields, scattered huts, the endless road stretching north. The air was dry and hot, dust swirling in clouds behind us. My hands ached from the shackles. My body, bruised and battered, throbbed with pain. Yet my mind replayed the events of the day before, the rifles that refused to fire, the sword that shattered. I whispered softly, Lord, you silenced their weapons. Can you keep me now? Hours later, the truck stopped in front of a walled compound. High fences topped with barbed wire loomed above us. Guard towers dotted the perimeter, soldiers watching with rifles slung across their shoulders. The gates creaked open. The truck rumbled inside. The guards dragged me out, shoving me through a set of iron doors into the heart of the prison. The air was thick with sweat, rot, and despair. Cries echoed down the dark hallways. They shoved me into a small cell, bare concrete walls, a thin mat on the floor, a bucket in the corner. The door clanged shut behind me. This would be my word for the months to come. Prison life broke men quickly. Days blurred into one another, marked only by the clang of doors and the shouts of guards. We rose before dawn, forced into labor under the burning Sunday. We dug trenches, hauled stones, carried loads far heavier than our frail bodies could endure. Food was scarce, a thin gruel ladled once a day, sometimes a scrap of bread. Water was rationed, often dirty. My weight dropped quickly. My ribs pressed against my skin. My hands blistered and bled. The gods treated us as less than human. Their boots were quick to strike, their fists quicker still. Every mistake was punished. Every stumble, every pause, every whispered word invited pain. At night, we collapsed on our mats, our bodies broken, our spirits worn thin. Yet even in the darkest hours, I felt a strange presence near me, unseen but real. It was during one of the labor shifts that I noticed him, an older man, thin as a reed, his hair streaked with gray. He moved slower than the others. His body stooped, but his eyes shone with something different. One evening, as we were herded back into the barracks, he brushed past me and whispered a phrase so softly I almost thought I imagined it. Peace of Christ. My heart jolted. That night, when the guards finally left, he inched closer to my mat. In the faint moonlight filtering through the barred window, he whispered again, "You are one of us, aren't you?" Tears filled my eyes. "Yes," I whispered back. His name was Samir. He had been in prison for nearly 10 years, sentenced for smuggling Christian literature across the border. He had survived beatings, starvation, solitary confinement. Yet his face had not dimmed. "There are more of us," he whispered. "Not many. We meet when we can, quietly, in the cracks of the night." From that night onward, I became part of the hidden fellowship within the prison. We could never gather openly. Instead, we used small signals, a cough, a phrase, a scratch on the wall. Late at night, when the guards were less watchful, we whispered prayers. Sometimes just a few words, sometimes entire passages recited from memory. I will never forget the first time I heard John 14:27 spoken in that place of despair. "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." Those words, whispered in the dark, were like water in the desert. We had no Bibles, no songs, no freedom, yet faith burned brighter than any flame. Faith, however, came at a cost. One night, a young prisoner named Ahmed was caught whispering a prayer. A guard stormed in, dragged him from the cell, and beat him until we feared he would not return. When they finally threw him back into the barracks, his body was broken, but his spirit was unshaken. With trembling lips, he whispered, I will not deny him. His courage seared into my heart. If he could endure, so could I. Though prison was a place of cruelty, it was also a place of small miracles. Once, after days of hunger, we found an extra piece of bread left on our mat. No one knew where it came from. We broke it into pieces and shared it among ourselves, thanking God for his provision. Another time, during labor in the fields, a sudden rainstorm burst overhead. The guards cursed the weather, but we lifted our faces, drinking the water like the sweetest gift. Each small mercy reminded us God had not forgotten us. My body weakened, but my spirit grew stronger. Every verse I memorized became a weapon against despair. Every whispered prayer became a shield. Every act of fellowship, a glance, a smile, a hidden word became a lifeline. I learned that true freedom does not depend on walls or chains. It comes from knowing Christ, who cannot be bound. Yet one question haunted me still. Why had God spared me on the execution ground but allowed my brother to die? I wrestled with this in the silence of my cell. Sometimes grief overwhelmed me. Sometimes guilt gnawed at my soul. Samir once told me, God's purposes are larger than ours. Your brother's death was not in vain. Your survival is not by chance. Both serve his plan. I wanted to believe him. Some nights I did. Other nights I wept into the darkness, still asking, why him, Lord? Why not me? After many months, Samir approached me one night with a whisper. There may be a way out. My heart pounded. Escape was nearly impossible. Those who tried were often caught and executed on the spot. But Samir's eyes burned with determination. I've seen the guards' patterns. There are weak points. If we move at the right time, we might make it. Hope flickered in my chest, mingled with fear. Could it be true? Was this God's next step in my journey? The night he told me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the barracks. The thought of freedom seemed almost impossible. And yet, had not God already done the impossible? Had he not silenced rifles, shattered swords, confounded judges? If he could do that, could he not also open a way through prison walls? I prayed into the darkness. Lord, if this is your will, guide our steps. Show us the path you have prepared. Little did I know, the journey ahead would test me even more than the execution ground. Friend, if you are still here with me, you've seen how faith can survive even in the darkest prison. I want to ask you to leave a simple comment. Jesus sustains. Your words may seem small, but they can be a light to someone else scrolling through the comments in silence, wondering if God is still real. Don't underestimate the power of your witness. The whispers of escape grew louder with each passing week. Samir had been watching, studying, waiting. Every detail mattered. The guard footsteps at night, the way the floodlights turned slowly across the yard, the times when the dogs were fed and became drowsy. One night, as we crouched in the corner of the barracks pretending to sleep, he leaned close and whispered, "Tomorrow, be ready." My heart leapt into my throat. Tomorrow! The next day, we were assigned to labor outside the prison walls, clearing brush along the northern fence line. 10 prisoners, 2 guards, 1 lazy dog tied by a rope that barely reached the edge of the field. Samir gave me a small nod. His eyes told me what his lips could not. Now, as the sun began to set, the guards grew careless. One leaned against a tree, smoking. The other wandered off to relieve himself. The dog, distracted with scraps of food, growled only half-heartedly. Samir dropped his tool and bolted into the thicket. My legs moved before my mind could protest. I ran. Branches whipped against my face. Thorns tore my skin, but adrenaline carried me forward. Shouts erupted behind us. "Stop! Stop!" Gunshots cracked through the air, bullets snapping branches overhead. We did not stop. we plunged into the wilderness, a stretch of barren land and tangled forest that stretched for miles. The sun dipped below the horizon and darkness became our cover. We ran until our lungs burned, until every muscle screamed. At last, when we could run no more, we collapsed beneath a grove of trees. Samir's chest heaved. "We must keep moving north," he whispered. "The border is far, but it is our only hope." I nodded, though my body begged for rest. For 5 days, we moved under the cover of night. By day, we hid in caves or dense thickets. Hunger gnawed at us, our stomachs cramped with emptiness. Once we found a stream and drank until our bellies ached. Another time, Samir discovered berries he said were safe. We survived on little, our bodies weakening, but our will to live burning strong. At night, as we huddled together against the cold, Samir prayed aloud. His voice was hoarse, his words few, but they carried weight. "Lord, guide our steps, blind the eyes of our enemies, lead us to freedom." I whispered my own prayer. "Lord, you silenced rifles, silence the footsteps of those who hunt us." On the third night we heard them, voices in the distance, dogs barking. The guards had followed. We pressed ourselves flat against the ground, barely breathing, as torchlight flickered between the trees. The dogs barked furiously, straining against their leashes. Just as they drew near, a storm broke overhead. Thunder rolled, lightning flashed, rain poured in sheets. The torches sputtered and died. The dogs whimpered, confused by the thunder. The guards cursed and turned back. Samir looked at me with wide eyes. "God has sent us a storm." On the fifth night, we reached it, a wide, rushing river that marked the border. The current was strong, the water icy cold. Beyond it lay the possibility of safety or capture. Samir gripped my arm. "Once we cross, we must not stop. Do you understand? The other side is dangerous too, but at least it is hope." I nodded, my body trembling with both fear and anticipation. We tied our few possessions around our necks and stepped into the water. The current seized us immediately, dragging us downstream. I kicked furiously, gasping as the cold stole my breath. Halfway across, I felt myself slipping under. Water filled my mouth. Panic clawed at me. My limbs flailed weakly. "Lord," I screamed in my mind, "save me." A strong hand grabbed my arm. Samir pulled me upward, his eyes fierce with determination. Together, we fought the current, inch by inch, until at last we crawled onto the far shore, collapsing in the mud, shivering and gasping. We had crossed. For days, we wandered through the countryside, on the far side, avoiding villages, hiding from patrols. Fear clung to us. Still, we knew deportation was a constant threat. Then, one night, as we stumbled near exhaustion, we saw a small house on the edge of a field. Light flickered faintly inside. Against every instinct, we knocked. A man opened the door. He was older, his face lined, his eyes cautious. For a long moment, he studied us. Then, quietly, he beckoned us in. "You are not safe here," he whispered, "but I will help you." His name was Elias, a farmer who had once been helped by Christians. Now he risked his life to return the kindness. He gave us food, dry clothes, and a place to rest. Most importantly, he connected us to a hidden network of believers who helped fugitives like us find refuge. From there, the journey stretched across months. We moved secretly from place to place, hidden by strangers who risked everything. Some gave us food, others shelter, others simply pointed the way. We crossed more borders, dodged more patrols, endured hunger and cold. At times, despair nearly crushed us. But each time, God sent someone, an unlikely angel, in human form to sustain us. At last, I reached a place where asylum was possible. Samir, weary but unbroken, chose another path. finding his way to a safer land where his family waited. When we parted, he embraced me tightly. Never forget, he said, his voice trembling. Tell the world what God has done. Never let them forget. Years have passed since that day. I live now in freedom, though the scars remain both on my body and in my heart. I speak in churches, schools, and gatherings, telling my story. I tell of my brother, whose blood cried out in that square. I tell of rifles that refused to fire, of a sword that shattered, of a stone that shielded us, of strangers who risked their lives to help. But most of all, I tell of Jesus, the one who walked with me through death's shadow and brought me out alive. The lessons learned. I have learned many things through this journey. That God acts at the last possible moment, not before, not after. That faith grows strongest in the fire of persecution. That freedom is not found in the absence of chains, but in the presence of Christ. That no bullet, no blade, no prison, no regime can silence the gospel. My brother's death was not in vain. His final whisper, "Stay strong, don't deny him," still echoes in my soul. I will carry it with me until my last breath. And now, friend, I speak not just as a survivor, but as a witness. You may not face rifles or prison cells. Your trial may look different, the prison of addiction, the chains of fear, the weight of despair. But the same God who silenced weapons on that execution ground can silence the voices that torment you. The same God who opened the river for me can open a path for you. The same God who kept me alive in the darkest places can breathe new life into your soul. Will you trust him? If you have never given your life to Jesus, let this moment be your day of freedom. Pray with me now. Lord Jesus, I believe you are the Son of God. I believe you died for my sins and rose again. I surrender my life to you. Forgive me, save me, and lead me from this day forward. Amen. If you prayed this with sincerity, know this: you have passed from death to life. Heaven rejoices over you. If this testimony has touched you, I ask you to take a step of faith. Subscribe to this channel not just as support, but as a declaration. You stand with the persecuted and you believe in the power of God to do the impossible. Leave a comment, Jesus saves. Let it echo across nations. And share this story, because somewhere, someone is sitting in their own prison of fear, waiting for hope. You may be the one who places it in their hands. May the God who silenced rifles and shattered swords silence the storms in your life. May he give you peace in trials, strength in weakness, and hope in despair. And may you remember always, when the world ties your hands and drags you to die, Jesus alone has the power to set you free.